whispering. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock had been on the road for days, filming in a remote town in northern Canada. Tired and desperate for rest, they checked into a quiet, old-fashioned hotel off the beaten path. The receptionist, a thin man with pale eyes, handed them their keys without saying much. "There's no one else staying here," he muttered as they walked toward their rooms. The hotel was eerily silent. The dim lighting cast long shadows on the crimson-patterned wallpaper. But exhaustion overpowered their unease, and they each retreated to their respective rooms. At precisely 3:07 a.m., Keanu awoke with a start. The room felt different. The air was thick, as if the walls were breathing. He turned his head toward the door. That's when he heard it. Muffled voices, just beyond the wooden frame. Whispers, soft, rhythmic, calculated. Keanu sat up, his heart pounding. The whispers weren't just outside his room. They were in the hallway, moving. His instincts screamed at him. He got out of bed, quietly opened his door a crack, and peeked into the corridor. Two men stood outside Sandra's room. They were tall, unnervingly still, dressed in black suits. Their faces were shrouded in the dim light, heads slightly bowed toward each other as they spoke in hushed, unintelligible words. Keanu's pulse quickened. Then, Sandra's door creaked. Keanu didn't wait. He stepped out. "Hey!" The men turned their heads sharply, their eyes cold, empty. But it wasn't their gaze that unsettled him. It was the way their lips didn't move, yet the whispers continued. Sandra, now awake, stepped out in her robe. "What's going on?" she asked groggily. The men took a step back in perfect unison. The whispering intensified, wrapping around them like invisible tendrils. The hallway lights flickered. Then, just like that, they were gone. No footsteps, no movement. Just gone. Keanu and Sandra exchanged a glance. "Did you—" "I don't know," she whispered, shaking. "I don't know what they were saying." They didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the pale-eyed receptionist was gone. The lobby, once dusty and dim, was now pristine, as if the hotel had never been there at all. They stepped outside. The parking lot was empty, their rental car the only sign that they had ever stayed the night. A newspaper sat on the ground by the curb. Keanu picked it up. The headline sent a chill down his spine. "Mysterious abandoned hotel demolished 50 years ago. Last guests reported hearing unexplained whispers before vanishing." Sandra grabbed his arm. "Keanu, tell me you're seeing this." Keanu swallowed hard. "Let's get out of here." And they did. But the whispers never stopped. Even now, when the night is quiet, they can still hear them, just behind them, always just out of reach. As the car sped down the empty road, neither Keanu nor Sandra spoke for a while. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on them like a heavy fog. The further they got from the town, the more they expected to feel relieved, but that relief never came. Sandra kept checking the rearview mirror. "Keanu," she finally said. He kept his eyes on the road. "Yeah?" She hesitated. "Are we sure we even checked into that hotel?" Keanu's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "We must have." But even as he said it, doubt crept in. Did they? His mind flashed back. Yes, they spoke to the receptionist. Yes, they had room keys. But what about the check-in book? What about other guests? Sandra exhaled shakily. "I don't remember falling asleep. Neither did Keanu. The moment between setting their bags down and waking up at 3:07 a.m. was a complete blank. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life. A static-filled voice cut through the silence. "You left too soon." Sandra gasped and twisted the volume knob, but the static only grew louder. The car engine sputtered. Then, the headlights flickered off. The car came to a dead stop. Keanu and Sandra looked at each other. Outside, the road stretched into a black void. The nearest town was miles away. No other cars, no sound. Just the eerie hush of nothingness. And then, tap, tap, tap. On Sandra's window, she turned her head, her breath frozen in her throat. A tall, shadowy figure stood just outside. A black suit, a pale, featureless face. Keanu slowly reached for the keys, but they wouldn't turn. The figure leaned in closer. Then, whispers, all around them. Inside the car, beneath the seats, behind their ears, words they couldn't understand, but they felt them like ice creeping through their veins. Sandra grabbed Keanu's arm. "Keanu," suddenly the headlights flashed back on. The car roared to life. The figure was gone. Keanu slammed his foot on the gas. The car shot forward. Sandra didn't look back. They didn't stop until they reached the next town. The final twist. A week later, back in Los Angeles, Keanu sat in his living room, flipping through the TV channels absent-mindedly. Sandra had called earlier, saying she still couldn't sleep properly. The whispers hadn't stopped for her either. The news played on the screen. He barely paid attention until he heard something that made his blood run cold. Local authorities have reopened the investigation into the disappearance of two men last seen wearing black suits. Witnesses recall seeing them enter an old hotel before it was demolished 50 years ago. Strangely, some claim to have heard whispers at the site, as if the men never left. Keanu's remote slipped from his hand. The screen glitched for a second, and for the briefest moment, he swore he saw a pale face, smiling, then static. The whispers had found him again, and this time they weren't going away. Ha! The whispers won't stop. Keanu sat frozen, staring at the static on his TV screen. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, louder than the white noise crackling from the speakers. Then his phone rang. He snatched it off the coffee table, nearly dropping it. The caller ID read, "Sandra." "Hello?" His voice was hoarse. She was breathing heavily on the other end. "Keanu," she whispered. "They're in my house." A chill ran down his spine. "What? Who?" "The men in black suits," she said, her voice trembling. "I." Her words cut off. Then silence. "Sandra?" Keanu's grip tightened. "Sandra, are you there?" The line was still open, but all he could hear was a low, indecipherable whispering. Then, click, the call ended. Keanu bolted to his feet. He grabbed his car keys and rushed out the door. As he sped through the streets of LA, his mind raced. This wasn't over. By the time he reached Sandra's house, the front door was slightly ajar. Keanu hesitated for only a second before pushing it open. "Sandra?" he called out, stepping inside. No response. The house was dark, except for the dim flicker of a TV screen in the living room. Keanu took a cautious step forward. The static on the TV buzzed softly, but it wasn't random anymore. The static was forming words. "We never left." His breath hitched. Then, behind him, a whisper. He spun around, but the hallway was empty. The air felt heavy, suffocating. He could feel something watching him. A sudden, quiet movement upstairs. Keanu swallowed hard and took slow, deliberate steps toward the staircase. The wood creaked beneath his weight as he climbed. He reached the top, the hallway stretching before him, lined with shadows. Sandra's bedroom door was slightly open. A soft, flickering light seeped through the crack. Keanu pushed it open. Sandra was standing in the center of the room, her back to him. "Sandra?" he called cautiously. She didn't move. He stepped closer. "Sandra, it's me. What's going on?" Slowly her head turned, but not like a normal turn. It was unnatural, too slow, as if something was controlling her. "And then," she whispered, but it wasn't her voice. It was them. The same eerie, breathless murmuring they had heard in the hotel, the same voices from the car. Keanu took a step back. "Sandra?" Her lips moved, but she wasn't speaking. The whispers grew louder, filling the room. And then a shadow shifted behind her. The two men in black suits emerged from the darkness. Keanu's blood ran cold. The men didn't move like normal people. They glided, smooth and silent. Their faces were still obscured, as if the shadows bent around them. Keanu grabbed Sandra's arm. "We're getting out of here." But she didn't move. Her eyes flickered with something unnatural. She whispered again, soft, almost sad. "It's too late." Keanu's vision blurred. The room felt distorted, as if reality itself was unraveling. The whispers grew deafening, wrapping around him like an invisible force. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him was the men stepping closer and closer. And then, nothing. The next morning, Sandra Bullock was found asleep in her bed, unharmed. When she woke up, she had no memory of what happened after she called Keanu. Keanu Reeves, however, was nowhere to be found. The police found his car parked outside her house. His phone lay on the living room floor. The call log showing his last outgoing call was to Sandra. But he was gone, vanished, just like the two men in black suits. Sandra tried to explain to the authorities, but no one believed her. There was no proof of the whispers, no evidence of the men, but deep down she knew the truth. Keanu hadn't disappeared. He had been taken. And somewhere, out there, in the quiet corners of the night, if she listened closely, she could still hear the whispers. The return of the whispers. Days turned into weeks. Keanu Reeves was still missing. No ransom demands, no signs of struggle, nothing. It was as if he had been erased from existence. Sandra Bullock barely slept. Every night the whispers returned, soft, haunting, just beyond her reach. Sometimes she swore she saw figures in black suits reflected in her bedroom mirror. She tried telling herself it was just paranoia, stress, hallucinations, until the night Keanu came back. The midnight knock, it was 3:07 a.m., a knock at her front door. Sandra shot up in bed, her heart pounding. Who would be at her door at this hour? Slowly she got up and made her way to the door. Peeking through the peephole, she nearly gasped. It was Keanu, dishevelled, pale, standing completely still. She yanked the door open. "Keanu? Oh my God, where have you been?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at her, his face blank, his eyes darker than she remembered. "Sandra," he finally whispered. Her breath hitched. That voice, something about it was off. She hesitated. "Are you okay? Where'd you go? What happened?" Keanu's lips parted slightly. Then he stepped forward. Sandra instinctively stepped back. Something wasn't right. Keanu moved too smoothly, like he was gliding instead of walking, and then she saw it. His shadow. It didn't match his movements. It flickered unnaturally, stretching and twisting like it was alive. "Sandra," he whispered again, his voice layered like two voices speaking at once. "Let me in." Sandra's body screamed no. Then, from the darkness behind Keanu, two more figures emerged. Black suits, pale faces, empty eyes. Sandra slammed the door shut. The whispers started immediately, louder than ever. They pressed against the walls, seeping through the cracks, crawling inside her mind. "You let him go, but he is ours now." Sandra clutched her head, shutting her eyes. "No, no, leave me alone." Then, silence. She opened her eyes. The whispers were gone. She hesitated before slowly cracking the door open again. The hallway was empty. Keanu was gone. The men in black were gone. The only thing left was a note on her doorstep. With shaking hands, she picked it up. One sentence was scrawled in ink. "He's still in there." Sandra didn't sleep for a long time after that, because deep down she knew Keanu hadn't come back. Something else had.